This is another iRaw podcast.
Welcome to Wildly Unplug. My name is Lauren. I'm going to be your guide, and this is the Wildly Rejected, aka Becoming the Bison, weeks 13 and 14 update. If you've been patiently waiting, thank you so much. I took a little bit of a break unexpectedly. It's been so chaotic that I didn't get a chance to sit down and record. I am pretty good about updating on Substack. That's going to be over at Wild Development Studio. You could probably search Wildly Rejected or Becoming the Bison and it should pop up. So I'm pretty good about updating over there. And if you've been patiently waiting, thank you so much. And, don't give in to the hustle culture. That's what we're all about around here. If you're new here, the idea is simple. Instead of running away from rejection, I'm heading straight into the storm like a bison. The goal is 1,000 rejections, and this is inspired by Gabby Carr's challenge. Because somewhere hidden inside all the no's are yeses, unexpected opportunities, and lessons I never would have found otherwise. And week 13 wasn't defined by rejection or an acceptance as much as it was by a realization. I had come across a video that had stopped me in my tracks. It said that nice people often attract predators, not because kindness is a weakness, but because people who manipulate others look for those who struggle to say no. Hi, that's me. They test small boundaries, first a favor, a guilt trip, a minor act of disrespect, just to see what you'll tolerate. Healthy people respect your boundaries. Manipulative people get upset when you create them. The line that hit me the hardest was, the most dangerous sentence in the world is, I don't want to hurt their feelings, while they are hurting yours. The video ended by saying kindness without boundaries attracts users, while kindness with boundaries attracts respect. And honestly, it felt like somebody turned a light on. Looking back over this past several years, probably my entire life, I often see how often I confuse being kind with sacrificing my own needs. During my During my very first podcast, if a co-host needed to leave early, I would respect their boundaries without question. They needed to leave. All right, we'll wrap it up. Goodbye. Or even if they couldn't wrap it up with us, fine, leave. Do what you need to do. But when I needed to leave, I'd often hear, hold on, we're on to something, just one more thing. Or they'd start asking me like personal questions and get me talking. It felt kind of weird looking back on it now, and I would stay like a fool. And I often had several events and outings that I was late to because I always put the priority as the podcast. And when I was finally overwhelmed and trying to grow my drone business with my husband, I asked to switch the show to every other week, and I was told no. It's easy for them to say. I was doing the majority of the heavy lifting. Ironically, after I left, the podcast eventually adopted the exact schedule I had suggested before slowing to a stop altogether. The moment I finally stood up for myself, my boundaries weren't respected. They were met with frustration. And looking back, it should have been a red flag. Connor, my son, reminds me that life isn't perfect and strange things happen to everyone all the time. And he's right. He usually is. But every now and again, the timing of everything almost feels absurd to the point where I sometimes joke with my husband, I must be living in the Truman Show. And week 13 was definitely one of those weeks. My lab, George, has been coughing. He's got a tumor and it's pressing against his throat and the coughing is getting worse. And he's almost 13. They can't do surgery, and we're just at the point of keeping him comfortable. And now the coughing has been waking me up in the middle of the night, and it's becoming heartbreakingly similar to what happened with my Chihuahua Violet before we had to say goodbye to her. I called to refill Georgie's cough medicine, expecting a simple phone call, only to learn that the prescription couldn't be filled because it was a controlled medication. And that makes sense. And they're like, does your previous vet have the record that they prescribed this? Because we don't. And Then when I got to talking to them, they said that their vet didn't even write down that George has a coughing problem. So 2 different veterinarians had apparently failed to document the coughing in his records, despite the conversations I clearly remember having with them. Suddenly, I was facing a mountain of unnecessary hoops while simply trying to keep an old dog comfortable. Thankfully, my husband swooped in like Superman. He called the previous veterinary office, got the records corrected, and by the end of the day, Georgie had the medication that he needed. Sometimes having someone willing to advocate for you makes all the difference. Later that same day, I drove 20 minutes for a scheduled meeting to review historical materials for a research project and book that I'm working on. I waited, and I waited, and I waited until it became clear that nobody was coming. I had been stood up at their own place of work. That kindness video, followed by these 2 experiences, felt like a 1-2 punch. Instead of thinking maybe they're busy or I'm sure there's a good explanation, I found myself wondering if this is the exact kind of behavior I unintentionally taught people to treat me like because I've always been so accommodating. The challenge, though, is figuring out where the line is. Connor tells me that when I finally do stand up for myself, sometimes I come across a little bit harsh. He's probably not wrong. I remember being frustrated after multiple veterinary visits when they couldn't get a blood draw on my cat, and my irritation showed. I was a veterinary technician for 5 years when I first started working, and not once did we ever turn away somebody because we couldn't get a blood draw. So, yeah, it seemed unusual, and my frustration shows, especially when, I have days, weeks, months, years of swallowing my frustration. It doesn't come out calmly. It comes out all at once. It makes me wonder how much of this comes from wanting people to like me, fearing rejection, or believing that if I'm patient enough, maybe people will eventually treat me the same way that I treat them. I also couldn't help but think back to almost exactly 2 years ago. About 2 doors down from where I was, where I got stood up, I had met with somebody about displaying artwork in their business, answering their Facebook post. They arrived 30 minutes late, apologized, and I brushed it off because, life happens, and try and give some grace. After my work was already hanging, about a week later, I was told I need to pay monthly rent. And I said, okay, that makes sense, and I need a contract, a rental agreement. And I don't think it was until I was finally told, oh, why don't you use the community room space, that the rent raised, and I was finally given a rental agreement. And it raised a couple times. Every time I assumed there was good intentions and there weren't strings attached, and then there were. It never occurred to me that someone else might see kindness as something to leverage instead of appreciate. It's probably the biggest lesson from this week. Not everyone approaches relationships with the same mindset, and recognizing it isn't being cynical, it's being realistic. Anyway, thankfully there were some bright spots mixed into the frustration. On week 13, I submitted one of my biggest applications of my year to date at the International League of Conservation Photographers Emerging League program. It took weeks of organizing my portfolio, refining some project descriptions, creating a CV, gathering some references, and making sure every detail that represented my work was going into conservation storytelling. Whether I get accepted or not, I am happy that I took the chance, and now I have a pretty defined portfolio for conservation storytelling. I also continue to be incredibly grateful for one of my closest friends who once again agreed to serve as a reference for me. Thank you, Jenny. You are amazing. Over the past year, through some career struggles, moves, rejections, uncertainty, and trying to figure out where I belong professionally, she's been one of the few steady voices reminding me to keep going, as well as my hubby. having even one person who believes in you during these seasons of transition is probably it's worth more than they realize. And I'm lucky enough to have a few. So maybe that's where week 13 leaves me. I don't think I need to become less kind. I think I need to become someone whose kindness comes with healthy boundaries and rejection be damned. I'm still figuring out what that even looks like, and honestly, I feel like I haven't found my footing yet. If anything, I feel like a toddler fumbling around. Maybe finding your footing isn't waiting until you feel confident. Maybe it's just deciding that your own time, energy, and peace deserves the space and respect that you spent so many years giving to somebody else. Here are the week 13 totals. Total asks 148, accepted 33, rejected 36, and in review 79. Now, on to week 14. So this will be a little bit longer of a podcast this week. So with week 14, the calendar reached the halfway point, and I decided it was time to take inventory of my 1000 rejection challenge, and I went through every submission, competition, collaboration grant, podcast pitch, personal ask, checked statuses and follow-ups where I could, and gave myself permission to finally close the loop on some opportunities that had quietly disappeared. If months had passed away without a response, I marked them as a rejection. And it's not really about being pessimistic, it was just creating closure. Hanging on to maybe forever only clutters the spreadsheet in my mind. It's one more ball to juggle in the air. And it felt good to start the second half of the year with a clean slate. One of the few updates that came in this week was another rejection from Create Magazine. At this point, I've submitted to them multiple times. I believe the total number is 4. And this latest no helped me realize that it's probably time to stop investing my time, because they have a pretty extensive questionnaire that you have to fill out. That takes a lot of energy, and also my money. It's about $35 to $45 every time you submit for them to review. So I need to focus on publications that would be a better fit. One of the unexpected lessons of this challenge is learning that you don't always have to knock on the same door forever. Sometimes you have to realize when it's time to knock somewhere else. The best surprise of the week wasn't from an acceptance, it was from a comment. Marble commented on my week 13 update saying that the challenge had inspired them. They shared, quote, "I just want to come on here and say you inspired me. Once I receive my letter of recommendation, I'm going to try and get 100 rejections for my book." Excuse me. Somewhere in that pile will be a yes. So that's incredible. It totally stopped me. When I started documenting this challenge, I hope a few people would follow along. I hope it might encourage someone to take a leap that they have been putting off. And if this project helps even just one person stop waiting for the perfect timing and start asking, then it's worth it. Because truly, this is a numbers game. You have to be willing to get back up again and try again. There was another reminder this week that success doesn't always come wrapped in a trophy. My documentary, Finding Frogman, was selected to be screened at the Alpine Film Festival. And while it didn't win either of the awards that I nominated it for, it was chosen to be part of the festival. A few months ago, I probably would have focused entirely on not winning, but instead, I'm excited that people in a theater in Switzerland will be watching something that my husband and I created. This challenge is slowly shifting my perspective. Being selected at all means the film is connecting with someone enough to earn its place in the lineup, and that's worth celebrating. Perhaps the biggest surprise, though, came from something that had absolutely nothing to do with art. I have been shopping for a new vehicle and spent far more time researching than I'm willing to admit. One SUV that I really liked had aftermarket tires installed, and during a test drive, I did a tight turn when I was backing up, and the tires were rubbing against the wheel well. And when I asked about it, the dealership's response was essentially, just don't turn that hard. Apparently it's normal if you get bigger wheels for like off-roading and whatnot. I don't need that. I just need a daily driver. It didn't sit well for me. From a safety standpoint, I didn't want to own a vehicle where the solution was simply avoid making full turns. So I asked a different question. What would it take to return the vehicle to a factory setup? Because if there's anything wrong with it, they're going to look at the wheels and be like, that's aftermarket. We're not covering it. And it's a lot of money on even just a used vehicle. A few months ago, I'm not sure I would have even asked. I probably would have been worried about being difficult or convincing myself I was expecting too much. And this challenge has taught me that being respectful, that asking a respectful question isn't confrontation, it's advocacy. The vehicle has already been sitting on the lot for nearly 90 days, and while I seriously considered accepting the problem, because I liked everything else about it, instead of settling, I kept looking. And ironically, that decision led me to another vehicle that checks even more of the boxes that I need. Fewer miles, less cost, and honestly, a better fit for me. If everything goes according to plan, I'm hoping to know more later this week. Psst, it's later this week. And you'll have to stay tuned until next week to hear the update. It's a little bit of a roller coaster ride, which led to more crazy, not even really crazy ass. Let's just say the car came home dirty and I was mad, but you'll hear more about it later. So anyway, it struck me how similar that this entire process felt to the challenge. Sometimes we're so focused on making something work that when we stop asking whether or not it's the right fit in the first place, we convince ourselves to accept compromises that we're afraid that the next opportunity won't come along. Sometimes walking away is exactly what steers you somewhere better. Pun fully intended, by the way. That's the biggest lesson that I learned in week 14. Rejection isn't always a closed door. Sometimes it's a detour that can be protection. Rejection has a funny way of steering you exactly in the right direction. Week 14 totals: asks 149, accepted 33, rejected 58, and in review 58. Thank you for joining me for this slightly longer 2-week update on the 1000 Rejection Challenge. Until next time, unplug, get outside, and see what develops. Disclaimer: everything discussed on this blog and podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Whether you're trying a new art technique, exploring outdoors, or taking on your own rejection challenge, please use common sense, follow all the laws and safety guidelines, and take responsibility for your own actions and decisions. Stay safe and stay wild.
For more great iRoar podcasts, visit iroarpod.com. That's IROARPOD.com.